Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today I'm asking the question, is it all right to proxy, and basically when it is okay and when it's not, and gonna kind of give you my take on this issue. I know some people have been getting into a lot of tabletop games and tabletop miniatures games, but proxying doesn't only apply to miniatures games, it can also apply to card games. Anybody who's played Magic the Gathering and maybe wanted to see what it would be like to run some Moxes and Black Lotuses in a deck, I'm sure has probably tried something like that. So really, when is it all right to do things like that, to do a substitution of a gameplay component that maybe you don't own? And so we're going to be talking about that in today's video. If you guys are new here, there's still time left to enter to win the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I'm going to be actually announcing the winner for that in a couple of days towards the end of one of my videos. So kind of want you to watch it all the way through, and that's kind of how I get you to do that. So full disclosure. Also, if you guys, anybody has been looking for one of the AI systems for Armada or Legion or any of the other free content I have on Crabbok.com, it looks like the website is back up now. There was a little interruption over the weekend, but I think databases have been restored, so everything is back up there. That being said, let's go ahead and jump into this video. So basically, if you're going to proxy, it's something that's kind of been frowned upon from time to time. If you're going to be basically playing a game, maybe a competitive game with an opponent using stuff that you don't own. Now, I want to clarify that proxying is, has a lot of different forms. Sometimes, you're using, like a piece of paper to mark something. Sometimes you're, using a substitution or what have you. But in all of its forms, the number one rule is you need to make sure that your opponent is all right with it beforehand. Like, don't show up to a game. If you're playing at a game store, and you've coordinated with somebody that you're going to be playing, maybe through like a meetup or a message board or a Facebook group or something like that, ask them in advance. Don't get out there and they drove all the way out to the store only to find they're playing against, something that maybe they didn't want to play against. Because it's the sporting thing to do. Hey, I'm planning on proxying something. I'm planning on making some substitutions or whatever. How do you feel about that? Were you hoping to have like a more competitive game? Were you looking for something a little more cinematic? Sometimes, like, I'm one of those people, I like to take photos of the games sometimes. So, if you're just using paper, little paper cutouts instead of miniatures, that would be kind of a bummer, So, and everybody has their own threshold on what they are kind of into. So I would suggest, if you're like posting that you're looking for a game, I would lead with that. That's a guaranteed way to make sure that anybody who responds to it is okay with it. I would lead with, hey, I'm looking to play a game of 40K or Star Wars Legion or Armada, but I'm looking to do, kind of like a proxy game where I'm going to swap some things out. Is anybody okay with that? And kind of talk about what you'd like to play. See who's there for that. So there are certain types of, there's very just different, I think, situations in which somebody would want a proxy, and I think some are better than others. And so some of this is just going to be my opinion, but I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on proxying, because I know this is one of those topics that there's a wide variety of opinions on. And, and also, if you can join the Discord, we have a great gaming Discord, the C5 Discord channel. Hop in there, and we're very family friendly. We have dedicated channels and sections for like games like Armada, X-Wing, Legion. We've got some 40K channels in there too. So I'd love to have you guys jump into the Discord and keep this discussion going. We also do some giveaways. There's still some promo giveaways going on in the Discord right now too. All right, so we have our homebrew. Is basically like one of those things I think that you usually have to proxy. And I don't even know if proxy is the right word, but I wanted to start the discussion with homebrew. Homebrew is basically if you've created your own unit, or if you've created your own faction. I know there's a lot of homebrew stuff for Star Wars Legion that's out there. If you're just basically creating something that doesn't already exist in the game. If you're playing Magic and you're like, hey, I want to design my own card. I want to put myself as a 5/5 trample, or something like that. If you're going to do that, you just need to make sure your opponent is okay with it. You might be, and this is one of those you really need to do before you schedule the game, like do this in advance. Like, hey, looking for a homebrew game. Does anybody want to play homebrew? If it's Legion, for example, and you've printed out one of the First Order expansions, that homebrew community has created or whatever, you're thinking of doing something like that. Somebody might be looking for like a game to get some tournament practice, and that's not going to help them, right? And that was so. Again, make sure it's fine beforehand, but as long as your opponent agrees to that, I don't see any problem with that. Now, I will throw out this disclaimer that any kind of proxying is going to be a no-no for tournaments, at least for larger tournaments. If you're running maybe a very, very, very small tournament where everybody's friends or something like that, then that would probably be fine as long as everybody agrees. But the general rule of thumb is proxying is fine for casual games, but a no-go for tournaments, especially for higher level tournaments like regionals or nationals or grand championships and things like that. And definitely for any tournament that the game publisher, whether it's Fantasy Flight Games or Wizards of the Coast or Games Workshop or Atomic Mass Games, if they're actually going to be involved in it in any way, then it's a definite absolute no. It's just one of those things you can't ever do. Now, granted, if you're a smaller tournament, a lot of times, there might be a reason where a TO, whoever's running it, would allow it. And so we're going to talk about some of those situations. So, but homebrew is one of those that you'd never be able to do in a tournament unless it was some kind of weird, like a homebrew specific tournament. But it doesn't really sound like a tournament. That's, homebrew is usually for casual play. Replacements, whether it's like alternate poses or different sculpts or even just substitutions, is one that is probably a little bit more acceptable. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say I'm playing Star Wars Legion and I'm running Commander Darth Vader, and I have the Darth Vader miniature, but maybe I want to do a substitution. I want to substitute this Darth Vader for, like, maybe I've got, like, there's lots of different Darth Vaders that are out there. There's a lot of companies making, like, alternate versions of a lot of stuff. I've done some Order 66 reviews, for, like, some of the alternate, Darth Maul poses and things like that. So maybe I want to run, Vader with, like, the mask kind of, like, sort of broken off, like when he dueled Ahsoka, and then he's just, like, enraged, and he's in this really cool, groovy pose. And I want to do something like that. That's usually one of those that can fly almost everywhere. There may even be some tournaments that would let you get away with that, but if you're ever thinking of doing that, always bring the original miniature or miniatures with you. And I think the same thing goes there if you're playing like a card game and maybe you have an alternate art version and an unofficial alternate art version, because official alternate arts are definitely allowed. But if you've got an unofficial alternate art, like you made your own version, of Darth Vader's command card, and it's like holographic and all kinds of fancy stuff, just have the regular one standing by just in case there's a question. Maybe you'd have an opponent be like, "Hey, I think when you made that, you increased the values wrong. I don't think you should have that many health." This way you can prove it in case there was ever a question about it. But alternate poses and alternate sculpts and things like that can be really fun. Or maybe you're going to run stormtroopers, but you have like these guys that are like off-duty stormtroopers and they don't look like stormtroopers, right? Now that is a case where, okay, it's an alternate, it's a substitution, but if they don't look like the unit, that's when it could be confusing for your opponent. And this is where the fun factor of the game starts to break down, because if you're substituting something that doesn't look like what it's supposed to be, then you might have a problem, because that might take away some of the immersion. It might take away some of the fun factor for the game. And it can also be confusing, especially if you have something that, like, if you're running stormtroopers in civilian clothes, for example, they might look a little bit like rebel troopers, and that might make the opponent kind of, you might get a tactical advantage from that, because your opponent's like, oh, well, these guys only have white defense dice. Let me roll against them. I once played a game of X-Wing against a fellow who was proxying some ships, but he did it in such a way that it was really confusing, because he had, like a Micro Machines TIE fighter on a base that was supposed to be a TIE Advanced, but instead of and it was supposed to be Darth Vader in a TIE Advanced, because he didn't have that for whatever reason, but he did, and then the base that was in it was like a Luke Skywalker base, so then it was the wrong faction. So I had no idea what this ship was, so I had to ask him every single time, and that really, it kind of ruined the game for me, because he did that with stuff like that with all of his ships, and it was a headache. and so it really wasn't fun to play against stuff like that. So at a certain point, it's like, are you gonna support the game that you're playing, because you could buy some of this stuff. So there's that. Another option is testing. If you like, I have the Burst of Speed card that's out here. Maybe this product isn't available yet, and I wanted to run a testing game. Like, hey, I wanted to run the new Wookiees, so and I printed out a whole bunch of like the Fluttercraft and this new and all the new Wookiee units and stuff like that. Maybe if I 3D printed the minis, maybe I printed the upgrade cards, or I ran a game where I tested Burst of Speed and how that would work. Is this a card that's not out yet? That seems reasonable. Obviously, you could never do that in a tournament because everybody wouldn't have the same advantage as you do. The card isn't even released yet, so definitely not fair for anything that's really competitive. But it's cool to like maybe announce like, hey, would anybody be down for a game where we test some of the new stuff? I've got some 3D printed, Mandalorians. I got some 3D print because I did that one time before the Mandalorians came out. I wanted, or maybe I 3D printed a Yoda, or I'm going to swap a Yoda in for something else and see how it plays. There's generally nothing wrong with that, because definitely, some people might really enjoy the opportunity to test out new content before it's released. So with all the previews and spoilers that we tend to get for new things before they come out, it's a really cool idea to basically to play test something, and maybe you want to figure out how much you want to buy. Maybe you're like, well, do I want one snow speeder or two snow speeders? Let's kind of have the base. As long as the base size is correct and it's not going to impact gameplay very much, you can try that, and it'd be fun for a testing game. I personally have no problem with stuff like that. It's not something I'd want to do all the time, but every once in a while it can be really fun to get like a little preview of how a game is going to be. Now, if you're playing things on Tabletop Simulator, a lot of that early content gets kind of programmed in pretty early, so that's another option. Another option is the product simply is not available. This is one of those, this is kind of a gray area, but I totally understand. I absolutely understand. If I'm playing somebody and they had to print out some upgrade cards because the only expansion that has those upgrade cards is completely sold out, or somebody 3D printed a Darth Maul because Darth Maul has been out of stock and just has not come back into stock yet. Well, that's not that person's fault. The person wants to get into the game. They want to play the game, and they would like to run Darth Maul. So they printed out his unit card, and they got a 3D or a proxy. Maybe they're using something else, that, as long as it's on a base, especially for like in a game like Star Wars Legion, especially for basically troopers, you have a silhouette, so it really doesn't matter if it's like not exactly the right dimensions for the miniature. As long as the base is there, you're really not going to have much of a problem. So I have no problem with somebody basically doing a this isn't available yet, so I'm going to swap it in for this. And this happens in other games too. And it really is kind of the same thing as borrowing somebody else's stuff, except that's totally legal. There's nothing wrong with borrowing somebody else's stuff. If you have their permission, you can use. You don't have to physically own all of the product. You just have to physically have the product, and so you can borrow stuff for tournaments as well. But if it's not available, unfortunately, you still wouldn't be able to proxy in a tournament. But at least in a larger tournament. But nonetheless, there might be some smaller tournaments that would allow some potential. It's not available yet, so can I run this? There might be cases where that is available. You'd have to check with all the other players and the judge or tournament organizer to see what they have to say about stuff like that. It's certainly an understandable case, though, if something just isn't available. We've had cases where a product will be completely gone for months and months. I mean, I think in one case, I think some stuff was out for a whole year. In Legion, I know Phase 2 clones were out for a really long time. In Armada, we've had ships that we've had to wait a year or more for. The Architans class cruiser has always been sold out, although in that case, it's a little harder to proxy. But there's really, it's less frowned upon to proxy something that you just cannot buy. Because we certainly know that you're into the game. The community as a whole recognizes your drama. Like sometimes they'll loan you the stuff if they have it, but there's a little problem with that. And then there's I just don't want to buy it, so I'm going to proxy it. That's the one where I have a problem with that, and it's not always an absolute no, because I recognize that some people want to play these games and maybe they have a limited income, and I only have 2 units of ARC troopers, and I kind of wanted to run a third, so I'm going to kind of proxy these. I'm going to substitute these. there are times where like that might be all right, and I can understand if if you just can't afford it yet, or maybe money's tight. I get that. It's generally better to run the stuff if you can, but then again, I've seen that same thing, if to give somebody leniency there, I understand, but I've also seen people that want to just well, they want to proxy everything. I've heard a story one time that somebody brought an entire army of just little pieces of paper where they wrote the name and they put them on the ground. They had 0 game components and they were just trying to play it with a piece of paper, and the opponent sneezed on the table and blew all their units off, and that was the end of the game. So that's obviously an extreme, and that's a secondhand story, but that's like an extreme example of like how not to proxy. So if it's just something you just refuse to buy, then maybe you're playing the wrong game. Maybe you should consider getting into a game that's cheaper. If it's you won't buy it because you want to see how it plays first, then I think that's in a different category, because then you're in testing, and it could be that there's something that's out, you don't know if you're going to like it or not. That's a different story, and I don't mind you proxying something for that. But if you're just, if you wanted to play Legion or X-Wing or Armada or 40K or whatever, like imagine trying to, show up to a Magic tournament or a casual Magic night, and all you have is cards that you printed yourself. I don't think that's going to go over very well, and I don't think people would want to play with you. So basically, proxying, I generally think it's okay. There's a lot of times where product isn't available. There's a lot of times where you want to try out something new or use an alternate pose. But I think it's important to do a couple of key things. Communicate with who you're playing with. Support the game. That's the game company, and also support your local game store where you're playing. It's kind of rude to just always show up into a store that you refuse to spend money in. So you should definitely support the store that you're playing in also. And with all that being said, if I missed anything, let me know down in the comments, and happy gaming to you guys. I want to thank you guys for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and help support this channel, keep this channel going. Thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you guys, and as always, have a great day. Make sure that if you're using nunchucks, turn the lightsaber igniter off. You might cut your legs off.